Okay. Always when I went to some symposium or some lecture, you start always with an introduction of the architect, but not of architecture. So I thought perhaps it's time that you start some event by speaking not about objects or like about buildings, parts, and or let them give at first like a voice. So welcome to META Discrete Parts Symposium. This is a little bit naive, it's a little bit simple. It's actually a tutorial, but it's a little bit, it's very much different, I think, to something what like normally like discourse would go, which is like from a very complex high level you start, and then in a more critical way you like just when you see now we are very much fighting with discourse of jargon and boundaries, and I think this is very much a different approach, which starts more with a very much a vulnerable, a weak, and that's the beginning is a bit sketchy. It's always like you fight with the technique. So I think when you work or begin over or what's anyhow working since a long time with something more digital, so it starts always with something simple, something vulnerable and weak, and like perhaps a naive thing. But then you begin to add, you begin to discover, you begin to read, to explore, and try to find something in this. And I would say that this is, it's not a little bit off the screen, but that this is very much, I would define as, or say that this is actually ecological thought or ecological design. So here comes the eco form. It means ecology not as something like sustainability, not like a measure like energy or something what is very much constrained, where you like evaluate a form towards like its measure. But it's more thought like that actually full looking for this actually resonance of things in itself, you build up or develop a kind of design with more kind of feeling. So like here comes the meta. Meta is actually exactly this in between. So what you notice actually, there's not a direct link or not directly a parameter, what you say is a direct connection between this evaluation of a form, but there's always like something in between actually another object. And this I would call, this is exactly the challenge of architecture, or this is always like in between some infrastructure and some society and so on, which is very precise and I think what we forgot in last time. So this comes into the notion of the discrete, which don't mean like just a rigid boundary or just like an edgy corny object, but more something which resists and behaves and is was a little bit added with actually or like a commodity which is already embracing something human inside. So we have actually this discrete you would see as an anthropomorphic part. So we are dealing today, beginning with parts, I would say. And this is a little bit now the symposium comes about. So what I little bit called for, or why we invited like a few people, which I think are very in similar topics interested. I call it Mereological approach, which I don't mean like some another ism or another term, but more like some call for that we consider parts, that we consider like exactly this working, which perhaps starts with something vulnerable, but builds on, and it's very important. So this mereology, like very old Greek word, which term I think is first time coined from Aristotle. And now I have the full screen. So, so from Aristotle actually comes also, I want a little bit to connect to a very traditional notion of a city, or like how you would begin to think architecture. So now Aristotle makes quite different to describe a city than you would commonly do. So he's not finding it according to its boundary condition, to like the city wall, or like its economic production, like the grid. There's certain constellations, there's certain density or a certain kind of character of this kind of settlement, of bringing these buildings together, which is then producing the theater, the agora, the store, and the wall, and so on. So this is quite different than you commonly, like, since the last 200 years, since the birth of Hegelian dialectic, would understand like a Greek architecture, where the task of the architecture is like transmitting the ideal, like the house of God, and the function towards like a real, and the real means, of course, the human realm and the understanding in the human form. So why this gets important? Like 150, 200 years ago, of course, it has to do with the expansion of industrialization of the city and its buildings and objects. So you cannot understand the building as one complete whole or one complete thing. So you start to bring it together through your mind or through perception in a kind of sequencing. So in architecture, we were great actually to build on concepts and create this tension, spatial tension between a subject and an object. And this concept we can scale up to this, what we call urban design, and what I would also criticize, because here's as well you reduce actually the city to a mass for the void of the wonder of the flaneur through the city. So, and that's quite strangely, there's projects in a time which talk about autonomy and the street as well, which resist this kind of abstraction or a kind of reduction, like for the wonder of the flaneur, like how you would like a nice city. And which are also, like, of course, because they resist, gets the main point of a critique actually in postmodernism. So usually, like the vertical city from Ludwig Hilbersheimer, made in 1924, would normally, usually you would explain it, on one hand, you can say you have a Fordist society, which actually, through its reduction, leads to a city of a mass ornament and redundancy of a repetitive city organization. On the other hand, you can take a modernist city of the like city which looks like a tree, and the postmodernist would now compare it to a diagram, to social science, and say, look, you have in the same way like very less connections of streets or on a right side connections in society. So therefore, the form of a city produces actually a non-social society. So in both ways, you can say like both they very much reduce architecture to an equation of content and form. So now since 60 years, so this is what we call postmodernism, you would now begin to tweak the equation by actually, one is like subtracting, and another is like the absorption to a kind of zero. So in both, and this was Bruno Sevi latest predicted as the zero architecture, no content, no form, but just repetitive, or like in stacking of representations, which leads then, like this is here shown like as a metaphor that the sucker for something like financial crisis. We see that the stacking of representations which have no form, no content, actually very much, I think, comes to an end as a concept for architecture, for thinking the city. So we know this, that it's quite problematic, and actually it's all conditioned now turned around. Now we know we cannot access this objects, so we don't even go there. But we keep exactly this tension between real and essential, between the idea, exactly this equation between the content and form. And it's quite interesting. This is a diagram from Martin Heidegger, drawing actually, because I really explained it, the aesthetics of Friedrich Nietzsche. You know, like every modern architect, or like all they refer to Friedrich Nietzsche's aesthetics. So what they tried or what they built on, and I think what as a beginning there, and what you can take on, that actually what I'm calling later the meta. That here, exactly, this is not a one-to-one equation, but in the middle you have actually architecture which itself is an autonomous thing can resist. So just to show an example, when you zoom in like a room which is constrained to a light condition or built on or planned according to light condition. So light condition is not a value in an array list, but it's actually, it's in itself turns to an object. Like they call it light prism or light body. So it's a very volumetric thing, which might perhaps transform. But which is a very compositional issue in itself in objects. These things is they're quite classical. It's reach specs here as well. But today is staying a little bit with Aristoteles. Mereological hexes poetical. Where it's exactly between the logos or between reasoning or an idea and the hexes, like the practice or kind of infrastructure. You have the meta. You have actually the poetic and the architectural object. So when we search this now, like try in close reading to go into a project of Ludwig Hildesheimer, let's actually go close to one of these slabs. So at first notice this rendering is so okay. So this rendering is this perspective is quite has a depth from 2.5 kilometers. So actually, this slab, what you would consider an architectural representation with common length of 70 or 100 meters, is actually a length of 600 meters. So this, what you say is punctuations. What you see is actually not a punctuation of a window, but comparable to the floor plan. This actually can just be a loggia, so a representation thing according to floor plan. So like this one apartment, this one opening. So this whole representation actually is not exactly like it's not exactly the architecture or the thing what is itself, but has something in between in a kind of rhythm or shows like the rhythm. So when you zoom in now, or when you try to find how they actually tried to build in this kind of, or figure out how you would arrange now this kind of apartments, when you not have the one-to-one drawing of windows or the form itself. So then Hildesheimer offers us a range of apartments, which you would then arrange or combine between staircases. This is quite conditional. So when you go through now these conditions, or the combinatorics, so it turns quite fast out that this number of conditions are much larger. Actually, you would have like a kind of neighborhood condition or compositions between these buildings. So one can say that in such a modernist project, which at first looks as universal and redundancy, actually already embeds an idea of variation. Actually, through the looking into or embedding again, looking deep and intersecting it with an idea, of course, of the individual and the experience, what we made in architecture over the last 50, 60 years. So this is a bit, again, like is a zoom out, let's say. So of course he didn't have just the descriptions of how to arrange apartments. So there's also an interweaving of several scales. So here, like slabs, they are constrained to a depth of the courtyard, to kind of a certain sun shading, to a kind of distance between subway stations, and so on and so on. So there's no hierarchy of them, there's no directly constraint or going on. So they're all in the same way, like parallel, which of course opens possibility for reconfigurations, like that. So this, I now show a little bit what refers to the model, what you see in the entrance. This is an exercise what we did here in Innsbruck this semester with students. So we actually tried to find now this in between in actually existing city plans. Like, for example, in Washington here, which is looking to a few blocks. So actually the communication of a city, or turns into explicit objects in a condition of fire protection walls between the buildings, for example. In a kind of void space which you have to keep between plots. Infrastructural aspects. And stacking of buildings or hierarchies of stacked plots. This, of course, such beings, they can obviously be more poetic, like a description of a city according to just balconies and free spaces, or a rearrangement from a block city to a more manifold condition. So what means is, or how you could now, this was like all like an urban scale. What actually this offers like from architecture scale. So, screen was obviously not. So, what Hildesheimer actually does is now he begins to see the city, or like this drawing of the city at a similar time, like by drawing or speculating on the configuration of a house. So he designs both at the same time. So a different layout of a building leads to a different layout of a settlement. So therefore, there's already an embedment in composition inside of the design of a building through the speculation of the city. So of course you can do this today with simulations. So you change of wall length, reach completely different figurations. They're quite self-similar, so this always creates quite similar characteristics. Of course, this is not scale dependent. This works also on different scales. And of course, for architecture, I think at the moment it's quite important this notion to work with the one and explore actually its absolute space in its configuration, or through its possible ways of figuration. But of course, these as well, like in a modest way, you could also add hierarchies like walls and slabs, which first produce a kind of corner conditions, I call it. We combine like columns and floor elements, configuration aspects. I have here again like a situation which are very sample through actually this different grouping and different composition. Okay, I could not continue and go deeper and deeper, but this is not at all a one-man show. Like it's just actually thought to offer with such thoughts which came out or based on a PhD work which I conducted here in Innsbruck. Actually, to invite now people of similar interest to discuss actually and bring a little bit today such thoughts forward. So, because Hildesheimer speaks a little bit that you might begin the design of a city with design of a kitchen, and then build from the kitchen an apartment, and from apartment a house, from the house a block, and till you come to regional planning and cultural thought. I thought to come to this closer, we make it quite opposite. We start with Timotheus Wehrmann, which is a cultural theorist from Nijmegen, which will explain to us the condition of the meta model, which it's, let's say, lets him talk by himself. He will directly gives us the next talk. Then we have a kind, okay, modernist would say regional planner, but Sean is actually a game designer for large-scale game environments. So he will tell us actually how there actually the building is not anymore a building, but very discrete parts, and what it means for design methodology as well. Then we have Dietmar Köhler, which is working at TU Berlin. At the moment, actually completes his PhD work. He will show us insights in some parallel thought. I think what we do here in Innsbruck, like how you actually address topics of digital with actually ecological thought and in the scale of urban design, or city architecture. Then we will have the first round table discussion. Like there will be no. Please keep your questions, and then we have a dense package of talks, and then we will have a discussion of this, like with the speakers, as well, like of course the other speakers which follow, and like of course from you, from the audience. Then after a short break, Harald Trapp gives us a talk about architectural systems. He's an expert in 30 years ago, I would say he's a typologist. Today, I'm very much interested how we coin actually today a description of a building. Or I think he's one of the main experts at the moment, a very interesting expert, like how you can think actually a building. Then we have a talk from Cassie Green, which will show him over his design work and methodologies what might mean the discrete exactly beyond the rigid boundary. Then we have a talk from Rasana Vasatita, which is as well like a PhD candidate from the IAP or here in Innsbruck, which will show us a Mereological reading, I call it like so, of the work of Osmo Matthias Unwers. Then we have a talk from José Sanchez. He's, in my eyes, one of the best teachers actually of urban design, and which he got actually the prize recently for that. Who is as well at the moment like designing games, and which is the reason I think why he's one of the main like interesting teachers for communicating aspects of urban design. And then the last speaker will be Jill Racine, which works in part Mereological. He's, I think, of course, at the moment one of the most interesting architectural designers, and I hope he shows us also a lot of work of robotic assembly that he's doing at Bartlett. So then we will have a second round table discussion. He will, as well like Marie will join this, which she's interested in jewelry design. And this might be super interesting, of course, when we look down how deep or how small we can get actually different architectural thought about parts actually in architecture. So and at the end, we will have a book launch, or like then actually open the book, which is like this comes, but this comes later. Okay, so that's it. So I think we will now try to get Tim on Skype for the talk. So thanks first from myself.